The President, please be seated. The court is now in session. As scheduled, today the Chamber is hearing the testimony of TCW 570 questions to be put by counsels for Mr. Kyusampon before the other parties of the proceeding, because this witness has been proposed by counsels for Mr. Kyusampon. And during today's sessions, we will conduct the examination as we did yesterday, and time will be equally allocated to parties as we did yesterday. Co-prosecutors and legal lawyers for the civil parties will have a half day for questioning time, when the two defense counsels will have the other half. Mr. Saikolvati is now directed to report to the Chamber on the current status of the parties to the proceedings today. Mr. Saikolvati. Good morning, Mr. President and Your Honors. During today's sessions, all parties to the proceedings are present. Mr. Nguyen Chie is present in his holding cell as ruled by the Chamber due to his health concerns. Witness TCW 570, who is to give testimony today, is at the waiting room, awaiting call by the Chamber. The witness has confirmed that the witness is not in a relationship with the co-accused, Mr. Kyusampon and Nguyen Chie, or a civil party in this case. The witness already took the oath on the 23rd of April 2013. The witness has no jury counsel, and there is no reserve witness for today. Thank you, Mr. President. The President, thank you, Ms. Saikolvati, and court officer is now directed to bring in witness TCW 570. Counsel for Mr. Kyusampon, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to you, and good morning to the parties in this chamber. I just wanted to inform you that we have been talking with the Nguyen Chie defense team, and we wanted to inform you about the way, a priori, we are planning to distribute our time. Our colleagues in the Nguyen Chie team have told us that they would need 20 to 30 minutes time to question this witness, and our purpose would be to be completed this morning by 11:30. That is just so that you can understand how we are intending to organize our time. Thank you, sir.
The President, we would like to make sure we understand your request. Time allocation for today is different from that of yesterday, but it appears to us now through your request that you would like to have time allocated differently from what we understand. Can you please be more precise on this? And so that the chamber is fully informed and so is the public and the parties to proceedings.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. President. I'm really not very lucky, am I? The clearer I try to be, the more I seem to confuse people. Yesterday, towards the end of the day, we took about half an hour to question the witness called by the non-chair team. Now today, the non-chair team has said that at the end of the day, they would need roughly half an hour to question the witness. So today, this morning, the idea is for us to finish by 11:30 so that the co-prosecutors can start at 11:30, and also that there should be half an hour at the end of the day for the non-chair team to put questions to the witness. I hope I was a little clearer. Thank you.
The President, thank you for that. Counsels for Mr. Nunchie, would you wish to say a few words on this new way of allocating the time and how you share this time?
Good morning, Mr. President. Not really. It's exactly the same as it was operated or conducted yesterday. We might need 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the end of the day. So it's completely in accordance with what Counsel for the Kyo Sampan team has just said.
The President, thank you. We would like to now hand over to allow witness to be brought into the courtroom, please. The President. Good morning, Mr. Witness. What's your name, please? Response. Good morning, Mr. President and Your Honors. I am Ruh Soi. I am from Piam Prachum village, Thrai Ambal Commune, Sang district of Kandal. The President, thank you, Mr. Rusoi. Do you have other names, or are you called differently, or were you called differently during 1979 or during the war? Response. Mr. President, I have no other name other than Rusoi. Question, how old are you? Response, today I am 60 years old. The President, Mr. Rusoi, for interpreting purposes, you are now instructed to wait a few, observe some pause before you can proceed, and wait until you see the red light being activated on your mic to respond to questions. Because so it will, your message will be properly conveyed through different languages, and indeed your mic will be automatically activated, and you may observe that sometimes you can see that the red light will be rather delayed before after each question. So with that, you can assure that your message will be conveyed, and court officer is now directed to assist you by turning this mic a little bit further from you so that you can see the red light easily. And the mic is very sensitive, Mr. Rusoi, so you can be sure that even you sit back like that, you will be heard as long as the red light is on. Question, what do you do for a living, Mr. Rusoi? Response, I am now a rice farmer. Question, what are your parents' names? Response. I am Rusoi. My father is Ruh Priam. My mother is Hum Plok. Question. What's your wife's name and how many children do you have? Response. She is Sok Siek. We have 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls. The President. Thank you, Mr. Rusoi. According to the report by the greffier of the trial chamber a moment ago, to the best of your knowledge, you are not in a relationship with the co-accused or a civil party in this case. When we refer to the co-accused, they are Nuon Chea and Mr. Kyusampon. Is that correct? Response. Mr. President, the account that I gave to the chamber is correct, although I don't remember when I gave it. The President, I don't think you understood the question. Actually, what I was asking is that whether the statement that read out by the greffier of the trial chamber that you are not in relationship with the accused or a civil party to this in this case, is that correct? Response. Yes, it is. I am not in any relationship with the accused or a civil party. The President. Thank you. According to the same report, you already took the oath before you were brought into this courtroom. Is that true? Response. Yes, it is, Mr. President. The President. Thank you, Mr. Rusoi. Now, the Chamber would like to notify you of your right under Rule 28, right against self-incrimination of witnesses. As a witness, you may object to making any statement that might tend to incriminate you. In other words, you have the right not to incriminate yourself. And as a witness, you shall respond to all questions put by the judges of the bench and parties to the proceedings, except the responses that you feel might tend to incriminate you. And as the witness, you shall only tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and that the truth must be based on your experiences and what you bore witness to. Do you understand this? Response. Yes, I do, Mr. President. The President. Thank you. Mr. Rusoi, have you ever given any interviews to the co-investigators of the co-investigating judges? If so, where did such an interview take place and when? Response. Mr. President, I do not recall the exact date when I gave the interview because of lack of interest in taking notes of the dates. However, it is clear that I gave interview to the working group who came to me in 2012, rather in 2002 and 2008. Question. Before you appeared before this chamber, have you had an opportunity to read your account or statements or been read to so that you can refresh your memory regarding these accounts? Response. Mr. President, I have reviewed the statements again already. The President, according to your best recollection, do you believe that the statements that you have just reviewed reflect what you stated before the co-investigators in those years? Response. Yes, Mr. President, I have examined them already. The President, are the statements consistent with the accounts you provided? Response. Yes, they are. The President, thank you. Next, the Chamber would like to hand over to counsels for Mr. Kyusampon to proceed with the questions. You may now proceed.
Bonjour, Monsieur le témoin. Bonjour.
Good morning, Mr. Rossoy. My name is Anta Gisse. I am international co-lawyer for Mr. Kyusampon, along with my learned colleague, Kong Sam-un. I'm going to start with a few questions. Please don't forget that we are being interpreted, so do be good enough to answer relatively slowly so that people who don't speak Khmer can follow all of your answers and statements. My first question concerns the different interviews that you have just been talking about with the President. You said that you had 2 interviews with the investigators from the OCIJ, and I'd like to just look at that for one moment. You talked about an interview in 2002 and another in 2008, but in our file there's only one interview with the OCIJ. On the other hand, there are 2 interviews with DC CAM. So my first question is, can you remember being interviewed by people from the DC CAM organization?
Response. Yes, I can. Actually, as I already mentioned, there were interviews, and I gave interviews to both the researchers and the investigators.
When you said that you had an interview with the researchers and with the investigators, are we talking about 2 successive interviews? Can I assume that you were not being interviewed by both at the same time?
Response. Yes, that's correct.
Vous avez indiqué.
You said that you were interviewed by the OCIJ investigators in 2008, and there is a written record of that interview dated 14th of March 2008. So would that serve to refresh your memory about the date when you met the investigators?
Response. Yes, it is correct.
As for the researchers from DC CAM, now, can you remember if your interview with them took place before or after you met the investigators from the OCIJ?
Response. Allow me to also make this clear that I gave the interviews to the researchers before I gave another interview to the co-investigators.
Do we therefore agree that there were two interviews on two separate dates with those researchers?
Response. It is correct.
At the first interview with the DC CAM researchers, were they Cambodians who came to talk to you, or were they foreigners?
Response. During the first interview, only a Cambodian person came to me. The person was conducting a research on the survivors of the regime, so I was approached by Cambodian only at that time.
Thank you. And the second interview? Apart from a Cambodian researcher, was there anybody else? And if so, can you remember who it was?
Response. I'm afraid I do not recall this very well. As a rice farmer, I could not imagine that I would be called today to appear before this chamber.
Non, ce n'est pas bien grave.
It's not especially serious. I'm just trying to refresh your memory, Mr. Witness. Does the name Steve Hedder mean anything to you?
Response. I may say that I cannot remember this very well, because as a rice farmer, I pay more attention on my rice farming than these matters.
C'est pas bien grave, nous y reviendrons.
Very well, we'll come back to this. One last question in this area. Can you remember the fact that these interviews were recorded?
Response.
Alors, c'était peut-être pas clair.
Perhaps I didn't ask this very clearly. What I was asking you was, do you recall the fact that these interviews were recorded?
Response. Yes, I do. But I didn't pay attention to this detail, whether I was recorded or not, but I knew my interview was recorded.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Can I look a little bit at your personal curriculum? You've told us that you're a farmer. My first question is to ask you if you went to school and if you learned to read and write.
Response. Yes, I did. I went to school to learn how to read and write by early 1970s. I was at grade 7. I could read and write.
When did you join the revolution, and can you tell us why you did?
Response. I joined the revolution. I joined the resistance movement in late 1970s. Rather, in late 1970s. And I would then go back and forth visiting my home. And on the 15th of April 1973, I joined the Khmer Rouge movement.
When you say you joined the Khmer Rouge movement, or when you joined the resistance, rather, are you saying that you were in another army other than the Khmer Rouge army? Can you please be specific about what army you're referring to?
Response. I joined the Vietnamese troops because the Vietnamese at that time joined forces to liberate Cambodia.
You said you joined the Khmer Rouge in 1973. Why did you leave the Vietnamese movement?
Response. There were some reasons behind this. First, I thought that only Khmer people would be the best to find peace for us, because I learned from the experience that the Vietnamese troops would withdraw after some time, leaving behind Cambodian soldiers helpless. With that, I was convinced that the only best solution was to join the Khmer troops for this.
Were there other reasons apart from the ones that you have just given us?
Response. I do not have any other reasons.
Je voudrais, si possible, vous...
If I may, I would like to show you an extract of the record of your interview with DC Kam, dated 19th of August 2003. The reference number is 19.158, and the ERN in French is 00899-429. The ERN in Khmer is 00008258, and in English it is 00710492. This is the first interview you granted to DC Kam, and this is what you stated at the time. Counsel Gise, we need some clarifications from you. You refer to a document which in principle is an annex to the introductory submission. The Chamber would like to know whether you have requested that this document be placed before the Chamber, whether it is on your list of documents, or is it on the list of documents in the interface for today's hearings? And in that regard, what are the remarks of the other parties? Answer: yes, this document is on the interface. It is a prior statement by the witness. We have just referred to the circumstances under which that document was prepared. There were 2 interviews, and this document is one of the prior statements by the witness that was provided to the parties and placed in the interface. Judge Laveng, I very well understand, but was that document indicated on the list of documents that had to be placed before the Chamber? And was the Chamber able to rule on that document? Because a number of decisions were issued. This is a new document pursuant to Rule 87.4. Are the parties in agreement that the document be used today? Quite honestly, I do not know whether that document is on the list, but regarding the witness's prior statements, I understand that there are no difficulties with that regard, but I will allow the parties to make submissions on that subject, if need be.
The President, Co-Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, indeed, we agree that the document was placed on the interface, both by the defence and by us. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the network at the moment, but I'm quite certain this document was on our Rule 80 document list as part of Annex 12. I don't believe it was put forward by the defence, but I believe it was put forward by us. And it was also included in a recently revised Annex 12, which was only filed approximately 2 weeks ago. So that's the information with respect to this document.
The President, thank you. Legal lawyer for the civil party, you may proceed.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. If the document is on a list, that shouldn't pose any problem. However, for reasons of fairness, may I request that the rule apply to all decisions of the Chamber? I believe that the document is on the co-prosecutor's list. In any case, I do hope so.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Counsel Guisset. Yes, Mr. President, my team has just confirmed that that document is indeed on the co-prosecutor's list, and I crave the court's indulgence for not having been able to provide this information more expeditiously. Mr. President, may I proceed?
The President, you may proceed with the question.
Donc, normalement, Monsieur le...
Normally, Mr. Witness, the extract of that statement should be placed on the screen. I have already given the ERN numbers, and this is what you stated during the 2003 interview you granted to DC Camp. I joined the Vietnamese army fighting along the banks of the Basak River.
Excusez-moi, Monsieur le Président, est-ce que...
Court's indulgence. Mr. President, do I have your leave to place this document on the screen so that the witness and possibly the public may be able to view it?
The President, so we just do as what we have done. the document is displayed on the screen, but if the witness says that he has not seen the document, it is withdrawn. But before it is placed on the screen, you should show the document to the witness first to see whether the witness has seen that document. But if the witness says that he has not seen that document, the document has to be withdrawn.
D'accord, c'était simplement pour...
Very well. That was mainly for the purpose of facilitating things. So I will make do with reading the document. The principle is that it is a transcript of an audio recording. So I just wanted to refresh the witness's memory by showing him the contents of the transcript of this recording of the interview he granted to DCCAM. Witness, you confirmed a while ago that your interview was recorded, the interview you granted to DCCAM. My question to you is whether you have ever seen the transcript of this audio recording.
Response. I cannot remember all the points as I have said, because I focus only on my living condition, on earning my living. And of course I have given interviews, but I cannot remember all the details.
J'en conclus que vous n'avez...
I conclude therefore that you did not see the transcript. And my question to you is as follows. If I were to read an extract of this interview, would that be able to refresh your memory? In any case, everyone in this courtroom is aware that you cannot remember all the details. So my objective is to refresh your memory. This is what transpires in this transcript of your interview with DCCAM in 2003. You responded to the interviewer questioning you as follows. I joined the Vietnamese military fighting along the Basak River front, but after they mistreated me badly, I decided to defect from their unit. My question to you is as follows. Does this refresh your memory as to the reasons why you left the Vietnamese army in order to join the Khmer military?
Response. I can remember some points, especially the point that I have said earlier regarding the decision to leave the Vietnamese troop, because I was mistreated by the Vietnamese troop, but I have not given the details regarding that reason. So the main reason is that
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Let us move to another point. You stated that you joined the Khmer Rouge in 1973. What role did you play from 1973 to April 1975? What role did you play within that army?
response. On the 15th of April 1973, after I left the Vietnamese army, I looked for the Khmer army. So at the time I did not have clear destination. I did not know where to go. And then I went to Svai Chek village and I met a unit over there. And I joined that unit. So my first objective was to become a combatant. Later on, after I stayed there for long, I was assigned to be in the economic section, and I became a chief. So this is what happened from 1973 to 1975 when I was in the economics unit. I was a group chief, and the members or my subordinates, the number of my subordinates was not regular. Sometimes there were up to 50 members. So those members came from defract monks, for example. So those forces were sent to my unit. They were educated, but of course, they were not forced. And after they got training, they were sent to the battlefield. So the number of the forces in my unit was not stable, in fact.
Pardon me, witness, for interrupting you. Thank you for your detailed answer. I am trying to put short questions to you because we do not have much time, and I hope that your answers will also be brief. If need be, and I need more clarifications, I will ask further questions. My question to you is as follows. As of April 1975, following the victory of the Khmer Rouge, where were you assigned? To what post were you assigned? Or rather, pardon me, I would like you to clarify something you said. You referred to the economic section in the Khmer Rouge army. In concrete terms, what were the duties of your section? What were its responsibilities?
Response. You asked me the period before I went into Phnom Penh or after I went into Phnom Penh.
Sur la période antérieure.
I am referring to the period before you went to Phnom Penh. You told me that you were a member of the economic section. Can you tell us in concrete terms what exactly were your duties or the duties of that economic section?
Response. After I was assigned to be in charge of economics, I was not overall in charge of the whole unit, but I was in charge of a small unit. I was in charge of food supply for the army. But of course, there were my superior as well. But I was responsible for collecting food, and the food would be sent to the front line, to the battlefield.
Je vous remercie de ces précisions.
Thank you for this clarification. Let us now talk about the period as of April 1975. What were your assignments after the victory, and where were you assigned?
Response. After the collapse of Phnom Penh on the 17th of April, my economics unit was allowed to go into Phnom Penh, and then a new unit was created, and I became the chief of a 50-member unit. So in my unit, at the beginning, there was an office called Office 311. my unit was assigned to stay at Kampong Tekok warehouse in front of Psa Thmei.
Et quel était ce travail?
And what did you do? What work did you carry out at the warehouse?
Response. When I was staying east of Psa Thmei, I did not the responsibility or the work of my unit at all.
Combien de temps avez-vous travaillé dans ce premier?
For how long did you work at that first warehouse?
Response. I would like to describe what happened over there. So after I stayed over there, at the beginning, I did not know about the work of my unit. But later on, I knew that my unit was in charge of a warehouse. At the time, there were two regiments. Sorry, there were two companies. And my unit was in charge of a warehouse. And I was still the chief of a 50-member unit. And later on, another 50-member unit was created so that we could manage the list of the people over there, the list of the inventory in the warehouse. And later on, I became in charge of the warehouse.
D'accord, donc j'ai bien.
Very well. If I understand correctly, your unit was in charge of managing the warehouse. And my question to you is, for how long did you stay at that warehouse near Sasha's?
Response. I worked over there from 1975 until 1976, and then it was transferred to kilometer number 6. I worked over there in late 1976.
Et au kilomètre 6,
And was kilometer 6 also the site of another warehouse?
Yes, it was also a warehouse. It is a branch of the warehouse unit. There was a branch in kilometer number 6, another branch at Chirojungwa, and the branch at Kampong Tekok.
quand vous dites établissement, vous voulez dire...
When you talk of warehouses, do you mean that there were 4 warehouses in all from what you have just stated?
Response. The warehouse along the river, it was located in front of Wat Phnom, and another branch was in Chirojungwa, and the other one was in kilometer number 6.
D'accord. Et
Very well. You stated that in 1976 you arrived at the kilometer 6 warehouse. Did you stay there up until the Vietnamese attack?
Yes, after the fall of Phnom Penh, I moved out of that warehouse.
Est-ce qu'il y avait un entrepôt au kilomètre?
Was there a warehouse at kilometer 9?
Response. I did not know about that. I know only about it.
Donc, si je comprends bien,
If I understand you correctly, between 1975 and 1979, you only worked at 2 warehouses. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is correct.
je vais en venir plus précisément.
Let's not talk about your work at the warehouses. But before we do that, I would like to know whether during the period from April 1975 and January 1979, you knew the organs of the CPK and you knew the leaders of Democratic Cambodia. My first question is as follows. Do you know what was the permanent committee of the CPK, the standing committee of the CPK?
Response. Regarding your question, regarding the standing committee, I do not know much about that because that was the work of the upper level and I knew nothing about that.
Et est-ce la même chose?
Question. Is that the same? Does the same apply to the Central Committee of the PCK?
Respond. I did not know about the Central Committee of the CPK. I knew only that Pol Pot were now as the Secretary of CPK. The Prime Minister of the Democratic Cambodia.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Do you know offices K1 and K3?
Respond. I did not know those offices and I have never heard of those offices.
Connaissez-vous le bureau 870?
Do you know office 870?
Respond. No, I did not know that office, but I have heard the name of that office, Office 870.
Est-ce que vous savez qui était à la tête de ce bureau?
Do you know who headed that office 870?
Response. At the time, I did not know about that.
Et savez-vous quelles étaient les fonctions de ce bureau?
And do you know what were the functions of that office?
Respond. No, I did not know.
Entre 75 et 70.
Between 1975 and 1979, did you ever work with S21 Security Center?
Respond. I never worked with the S21 Security Center. I did not know about that security center at all.
Est-ce que vous avez travaillé au sein du comité?
Did you work at the Commerce Committee or in the Commerce Committee between 1975 and 1979?
Response: No, I never worked with the Commerce.
Et avez-vous jamais travaillé avec le comité de l'industrie?
Did you ever work with the Industrial Committee?
Response: regarding the industry, I used to only transport products from factory, and those products were stored in the warehouse, and that's all.
Je vous remercie de ces précisions. Je vais revenir.
Thank you for these clarifications. Let us go into greater detail regarding your daily work at the warehouse. But before we do so, I would like to put some questions to you regarding the officials of Democratic Cambodia, the people who worked in the regime. I would like to know whether you know them. Do you know a person by the name Sakimut?
Response: No, I don't know him.
Vous avez indiqué.
You told us that you knew that Pol Pot was the CPK's secretary. Did you work directly with him?
Response: No, I didn't. Nor had I ever even spoken to him in person.
Did you know somebody called Bong?
Response: Yes, I did, but I had heard of him. I never met him in person.
Donc, quand vous dites.
So when you say you knew him, what you mean is you knew him by name. Is that correct?
Response: Yes, it is. I have heard of his name.
Savez-vous?
Do you know what his job was?
Response: No, I didn't. I had only of him. That's all.
Est-ce que vous connaissez?
What about somebody called Dun? Did you know him?
Response: No, I didn't.
On m'indique que c'est peut-être à cause.
Perhaps I have a difficulty with the pronunciation. It's written D-U-N-G, so I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Dung Dong. Perhaps I could be assisted so the witness can understand who it is I'm talking about.
Response: I knew the name you pronounced, but the name was correct, but I didn't know him.
L'avez-vous?
Did you never meet him?
Même de loin sans le.
Even see him from afar without actually speaking to him? Did you actually see the person?
Response: As I already said in my interviews, sometimes I saw people who would come to the warehouses, but I did not pay great attention to knowing their names because I had to fulfill my duty, and I did not even rush to see who would be coming to the warehouses. It was not of my great interest.
I might come back to this point in a little time, but first, I'd like to ask you who your direct supervisors were in the warehouse.
Response. At the warehouses in Kampong, Tekok, Chrui, Chongwa, and another location, these warehouses are supervised by a person by the name of Rương, and other people also whom I don't know.
Est-ce que le nom de...
What about the name Teng? T-E-N-G. Does that ring a bell with you?
Response. Yes, it does.
Et qui était-il?
And who was he?
Response. Teng was Mr. Rung's deputy.
Est-ce que...
Did you know somebody called Won Wet?
Response. I had heard of him. I never met him in person.
Did you work with him or his office as part of your warehouse job?
Response. No, I didn't. I did not have any work relation with him.
Connaissez-vous...
Did you know Van Riet?
Response. Yes, I do. Very well.
Quel était son poste?
What was his position between 1975 and 1979, if you know?
Response. Between 1975 and 1979, I did not engage in any appointments or recruitments setting, but I knew that Mr. Van Riet was in charge of commerce.
Did you ever work directly with him?
Response. No, I didn't work directly with him.
Et connaissez...
Did you know Koitun?
Response. I had heard of him. I never met him in person.
Je vous remercie de...
Thank you very much for those details. You talked to me about Rön as being somebody who was in charge of the state warehouses. Did you know the hierarchical structure for the state warehouses and who was his superior?
Response. I don't know who his superiors could have been, I'm afraid.
Do you know what the governing structure above the warehouses was like?
Response. I only knew that when commodities or goods had to be distributed to sectors, I learned that documents were sent from K25 requesting for goods to be distributed to various locations. These were the letters I knew that were sent from that office, and I do not know who would be overly in charge of these houses or above.
Who gave you your orders in your work?
Response. When it comes to orders, I received them from Mr. Ruong. For example, upon having received the documents regarding the distribution of goods to different places, then I would need to upload the goods onto the trucks before they could be transported to respective destinations.
Do you know anybody called Chun, C-H-U-O-N?
Response. Could you please repeat that question?
Est-ce que vous connaissez?
Are you aware of somebody called Chun, C-H-U-O-N?
Response. Yes, I know this person.
Qui était-il?
Who was he and what were his duties?
Response. Mr. Chun was the third person in the warehouse committee, because this committee comprised of 3 people. Mr. Ruong was the head and another person, and Mr. Chun was a member in the committee.
Est-ce que
Was the other person the Tang person that we mentioned a moment ago?
Response. Yes, it is correct. It was Tang who was Mr. Ruong's deputy. So, in other words, in that committee, there were 3 people: Ruong as the head, Tang his deputy, and Chun his member.
Thank you for those details. Are you aware of Office K7? You mentioned K25, but did you know about K7?
Response. No, I don't know anything about K7.
une question supplémentaire?
from the work that you did in the warehouse, did you have other responsibilities or duties?
Response: No, I didn't. I had no other duties other than those in the warehouses.
Et à l'entrepôt, est-ce
In the warehouse, were you basically concerned with receiving and delivering produce, or were there other activities as well?
Response: Personally, I was tasked with the warehouse's duties at Kampong Tekak. I was tasked with transporting materials to be stored in the warehouses, and at the same time I had to receive orders or instructions from superiors before the rice, for example, and other items could be requested and transported to the requesters or have them stored in the warehouses. So that was part of my main duty. And by the end of each month, I would have to file a report detailing all the items or materials that had been transported to different destinations. And Rương was the person I reported to.
D'accord.
Thank you. I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into the actual produce and materials that were stocked in these warehouses. You've mentioned rice, but what other kinds of products were stored in these warehouses?
Response: In the warehouses, in particular in the warehouse in Kampong Tekak, there were things like materials transported from a foreign country, including hose, fabrics, steels, and screws, etc. For the warehouse at Kilo number 6, there were materials transported or produce transported from the bases, including rubber, resin, salt, rice, etc.
What was the destination of these products?
Response: As I already testified earlier on, after these products or produce were stored in the warehouses, there would be requests for the products or produce to be transported or distributed to other locations. Now, I'll give you an example. One particular zone may request for some cement that was stored in the warehouse, or pairs of shoes or garments. Then we had to entertain the requests through Mr. Rương. Mr. Rương would then render requests to his subordinates, and I would be one of them to ensure that these things would be then transported to the requesters.
But how did the zones make their requests? In what particular shape or form?
Response. I do not know how such a request could have been made. I only noted that documents were sent out from K25, and I was instructed by Mr. Ruang to proceed with the inventory. For example, the list of items to be sent out to the requester, and I was busy entertaining the request to know what could have been the method of instruction rendered from the zone.
Perhaps we have an interpretation problem here. I understand that you received instructions from Ruang, who himself received instructions from K25. Have I got it right?
Response. That is correct.
Savez-vous
Do you know how the items were obtained, which was then redistributed to the bases? You talked about products coming in from abroad. In that case, do you know what particular countries these products came from?
Response. I don't know where they could have been transported from. The only thing I know is that whenever these materials were transported from abroad, then we had to unload them from the train. I don't know which country these items were sent from.
You told us about products coming in from abroad, but were there also Khmer products within the warehouses where you work were destined for export?
Response. In the warehouses, we exported only rubber and rice. These produce would be transported through train.
dans les entrepôts?
In the warehouses where the rice was stored, was that rice exclusively for export, or was it also for consumption within Cambodia?
Response. The rice and the unhusked rice that was stored in the warehouse, first they had to be transported from sectors and zones, and we learned that at that time we had to transport the rice for the state. That was part of the slogan. I know for sure that the rice had to be transported and stored in the warehouses. And I don't know whether the rice was destined for local consumption or not, but I knew that rubber and rice were requested to be exported to foreign countries. I just don't know which country they would be transported, because upon receiving the requests, we would then employ some workers or porters to load these rubber or rice onto the wagons of the freight train. And that's all I know. I don't know which country these produce would be transported to.
Dans le cadre de votre...
Did you ever prepare produce such as rice during your work so as to ship it out to the zones?
Response. Rice was not supposed to be redistributed to the zones or sectors, but the other way around. Because we had to transport the rice only to the warehouses before they could be exported to a foreign country. And we waited to distribute this rice to the foreign country. And to be precisely clear, it is rice would never be redistributed to the zones or sector, but the other way around.
Let me now refresh your memory once again, because in fact you brought up the rice question when you were talking in 2003 with the DCCAM researcher, and I'd like to look at an extract of what you said during that interview. This is still document 19158 ERN in French 00899462. In Khmer, the ERN is 00008293, and over the page, and in English, it's 00710521. The researcher is talking about exporting and importing rice. In French, it's the page just before, 00899461. And the question that you're asked on the subject is, was most of the rice exported or distributed in the country? And you said that less rice was exported than was distributed. And the researcher says rice export was less, and you answer that the rice export is less than that of domestic disbursement. So does this help you to remember about how things were done in the state warehouses for rice distribution?
Response. When I gave interview to the researcher, perhaps my message was not properly received. Today I'm telling the truth. And again, I think he misconveyed my message, because at that time I said that when I said less rice exported, I was referring to the rice that was distributed for the local consumption, which I was talking about the rice indeed, unhusked rice was not exported in a large amount. Unhusked rice would be used for local consumption when the husked rice would be then exported in a great amount.
Well, so talking about two kinds of rice that you make a distinction between, but there was nevertheless one kind of rice that was destined for local requirements, for the local population. I'm understanding that from your answer.
Response. Allow me to clarify on this. So far, no meal rice was ever distributed to the people in the local in Cambodia, but it's destined for exporting. However, when time passed, rice production decreased. That's why export also decreased.
Lorsque la production du riz a
When rice production dropped, exports also dropped. Is that what you are saying?
Response. Yes, it is correct.
Je voudrais maintenant venir plus précisément.
I would love to talk specifically about Mr. Kyo Sampan. Did you know him at the time between 1975 and 1979?
Response. I knew him, but of course, I was not close to him. I just saw him.
Je vais revenir plus précisément.
Let's not talk specifically about the times when you saw him. But before we get there, do you know the post he occupied in the Democratic Kampuchea regime?
Response. From 1970 to 1973 to 1975, I never saw him. However, after Samdech appealed to the people to struggle, to rise up, to struggle, to liberate the nation, then I only knew that Hu Yun, Hu Nam, and Khieu Sampon were the leaders of the movement. But later on, in 1975, from 1975 until the announcement of the Prime Minister, then I realized that Khieu Sampon was not the top leader or the senior leader.
Comment avez-vous compris?
How did you know that he was not a senior official? What makes you think so?
Response. Civilian or soldier believe that the three people were the big leaders or the top leaders. However, when Prime Minister was declared or was announced, we all realized that he was not the top leader at all.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres éléments qui vous fait comprendre?
Are there other reasons that made you to think or to understand that he was not a senior official?
Response. I knew about that not because I attended any meeting or any discussion with the senior leaders, but in each unit we met with our colleagues, we discussed with each other, and then we knew leader was not the most senior leader or the top leader. But of course, I did not know clearly about his rank.
Je reprends ma question de tout à l'heure.
Let me repeat the question I put to you a while ago. Did you see him between 1975 and 1979?
Response: I used to see him. But I do not remember. I cannot remember the date. As you know, at the time, we do know whether this is Sunday. No. We focus only on work. We were afraid of making mistakes.
Et où l'avez-vous vu, Monsieur Kyosampan?
Where did you see Mr. Kyosampan?
Response: I saw him when he called me to attend study sessions. So at the time, I saw him.
Je vais y revenir, mais l'avez-vous?
I will revisit that point, but did you see him on any other occasion?
Response: no.
Je voudrais vous rafraîchir la mémoire.
I would like to refresh your memory with your statement before the co-investigating judges. But let me ask one question before that. You talked about a visit by someone to your warehouse. Do you recall a time when Mr. Kyosampan came to visit your warehouse?
Response: of course, I used to see him visit the warehouse, but I did not get close to him. But I just knew that he came to visit the warehouse.
Je voudrais vous rafraîchir la mémoire sur les...
Let me refresh your memory regarding the circumstances of that visit. In your statement before the co-investigating judges, and by the way, may I request that the statement be shown to witness E3/469.
The President, you may proceed. The President, Counsel, it is now time for adjournment. The court will resume by 11 o'clock. Court officers are directed to take Mr. Witness to assistant break. Bring him to the courtroom at 11 o'clock. The court is adjourned.
សូមយើងក្រោកឈរ